became really a sensation and still is today for a record number of expatriates and others. When did the worm turn for you, or were you always that way, Doug Casey?
Well, like yourself, I'm a libertarian. I believe in free minds and free markets, and I think I was born that way, quite frankly. It may be some type of a genetic mutation for all I know. But the thing is that all of our ancestors, all of us who are Americans, they all came here from foreign countries. And our ancestors came to America because they wanted to get away from being turned into slaves in different countries around the world. The problem is that the U.S. government, since it's going in the same direction as those governments that our ancestors ran away from, now we have to run away from. We have to go someplace else ourselves. We have to find a new America someplace.
But King George the 10th knows we're running away, and so now our own government's creating a global government to try to capture everyone.
Yeah, it's right. That's right, because we can try to run, but we can't hide. I mean, the fact that at this point it's very, very hard, almost impossible for an American to open up a foreign bank or brokerage account means that we're trapped like lobsters here in the United States. Now, of course, most Americans are going to say, I don't want to leave America. This is the greatest country in the world. And it certainly used to be, but you no longer even have the option of living somewhere else, because if you can't open up a foreign bank or brokerage account, how are you going to get your money out of the country? I mean, the various possible exits, if you want to take advantage of them, are closing almost daily.
You're right. Doug Casey, CaseyResearch.com. Stay there. We're going to come back in the next segment and get into solutions and your prognosis for the future. Okay, Doug, I've been ranting here for 5 minutes. Thank you for holding during that. I know you don't ever want to come on and toot your own horn about your books, about your newsletters, about your invaluable research that's cutting edge. Tell us about some of the research materials you've got available for the public at Casey Research. Talk about some of your books, and then get into what you're doing to get prepared, what you think this monster is that's coming down the road at us, this mad dog, and how you and others are getting prepared. Why are the elites in The Guardian now buying armored redoubts, underground bunkers, running to New Zealand? I mean, when the elite themselves are splitting the scene, they may have cooked this goose a little too much, may have killed the golden goose. Doug Casey.
Where to start, Alex? One thing I was thinking about as you were talking earlier is the fact that governments around the world at this point are trying to get rid of cash. In other words, paper currency. There's a movement on that, since everybody has a cell phone today, to use the cell phone to obviate even credit cards, and certainly obviate cash, so that everything you buy or sell has to go through your bank account. At that point, the government knows exactly what you're doing, what you're buying, and what you're selling, because there will be no cash anymore to even buy a candy bar, quite frankly. Now, this is a very disturbing trend that's taken root just over the last year or two, and is accelerating rapidly all over the world. But what do you do about that? One thing that you should do about it, I think, is buy, for your personal possession, gold and silver coins at this point. Gold and silver have been used as money throughout history for lots of good reasons, and they will continue to be used as money in the future. So, for the sake of your personal privacy, you want to own a lot of gold and silver, I think. it'll obviate the government's efforts to make all money transfers electronic. So that's just a thought. And I'll point out right now that as we speak right now, both of those metals are once again in a very reasonable buying zone. Silver is about $16. Gold is about $1,175 an ounce. I think the next step is up for both of them from this point forward. So I think that all of your listeners ought to have a significant stash of gold and silver coins put away in the safest place that they can think of. So that's one piece of advice that I'd recommend.
And by the way, as you know, it's come out in the news, what you and others said years ago, the big central banks have been naked shorting gold and silver, artificially driving down its price while they buy it and hoard it.
Well, yeah, it's very problematical. In the world, there are about 6 billion ounces of gold that have been mined since the dawn of history. We don't know exactly how many ounces of gold there are in the world, but the best estimates are about 6 billion ounces of gold. In other words, less than an ounce for every man, woman, and child in the country. So I think it's incumbent upon everybody to have at least an ounce of gold in their own possession. Better 10 or 20 or 100 or more ounces of gold in their possession. I think the price of gold is going up, and the price of silver perhaps even more. So that's step number one. But step number two is because all of these governments are creating trillions of new currency units. This isn't just the U.S. government, starting with QE1 and QE2 and the bailouts and TARP and all this type of thing. But the Europeans are doing the same thing, the Japanese and the Chinese. So this is a worldwide phenomenon. And the next step, I think, is the Greater Depression gets worse in the next few years. It's going to be much higher levels of inflation. It's going to be much worse than things were in 2008 and 2009, and also much different. But one of the advantages, I'm trying to look at the bright side of their destroying all these national currencies, is it's going to create more bubbles in the economy. And right now, as we speak, we're in the biggest financial bubble in history, and it's in the bond market. Interest rates have been driven down to zero, actually zero in some cases, which means the bond prices are at an all-time high. So I think the next step is that the bond market crashes, and that's much more serious than the stock market crashing, but it'll bring the stock market down too, and it'll bring the real estate market down with it, quite possibly, because unfortunately, in the U.S. and most of the Western world, real estate floats on a sea of debt. And if you can't borrow at reasonable interest rates, you really can't buy or sell real estate because most houses have mortgages against them today. So it's a serious problem, but it's a problem that presents opportunities because although most people are going to lose most of what they have, it's going to be possible to capitalize on that and as a speculator to win from the unwinding of all these things.
And people can specifically go to kcresearch.com and see some of the strategies you've been employing?
Well, we have a lot of free publications. We have paid publications, too, that have specific stock recommendations. But in terms of general advice, we've got a huge amount of free information that I urge people to access to start thinking about these things and start moving. Because, you know, the problem is that a lot of people that listen to you, and for that matter, listen to me, they think about these things, but they don't act. And I think the time is getting short for action. And what form of action should they take? Putting aside a significant amount of savings in precious metals, is the first and most important thing. Second thing is, if you're in a financial position to do so, diversify your assets internationally so all of your wealth isn't under the control of just the U.S. government. And three would be to look for ways to capitalize on what they're doing, speculations that will profit from all the money creation going on. So you don't want to be a deer in the headlights. This is the time for action.
Let's talk about deer in the headlights, because every financial expert out there says obviously the trillions in derivatives, the quadrillions, the velocity of money, the QE unlimited, the currency race to the bottom, what's happening with the bond markets, that it's a bubbles that will pop, and then it runs from bad to worse. But because of all their high-frequency trading and plunge protection teams and other manipulations, they're able to build this bubble, I think, to a level never before seen. A, do you agree with that statement? Is it wrong? And how do you see this thing coming down?
Yeah, in other words, what's going on right now is building up to something much bigger than what happened during the last depression from 1929 to 1946. It's much bigger, much more serious, and governments are much more powerful than they were back then. So it's hold on to your hat time, and I think we're right at the edge of the precipice right now. But I don't think most people are even aware of that, because when you walk outside, the sun is shining, children are still playing. Maybe the occasional cop is beating one with his nightstick, but you can go down to the Walmart and buy cheap goods. Everything looks pretty good on the surface, but I think it's a hologram that's about to be exposed at this point.
And that's why the elite are digging into armored bunkers. What are they thinking is going to come? I mean, I know you talk to a lot of really wealthy people, but these are real entrepreneurs that actually go out and explore and mine and drill and build things. They're not the parasite variety, but I know a lot of those folks that aren't parasites, they're also preparing escape plans as well.
Well, so much of what goes on in the world today is financed by the U.S. government. In other words, yeah, you're quite correct about that. There is cause for optimism, of course. It's that there are two reasons why things have been getting better despite the depredations of government with its taxes and its regulation and its currency.
Let's end on a positive note. Sorry to interrupt. Doug Casey, CaseyResearch.com. Let's come back and talk about the flip side. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. We've been talking about the problem and some of the solutions, but yeah, what are the optimistic, positive things with our final segment with Doug Casey, the legend, straight ahead. I'm Alex Jones, Infowars.com. Up in the third hour. We're also going to get another update and see if there's been some developments that may be taking place in Austria covering Bilderberg. But Doug Casey, getting into the optimistic, good things that are happening, despite corporate combines that work with government to basically freeze society in a new dark age, the renaissance continues. So go ahead and finish up with some positive notes, Doug Casey.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Two things, actually, are the mainsprings of human progress and cause for tremendous optimism. Number one is that the average person understands that he has to produce more than he consumes and save the difference. And that builds capital, the excess of production over consumption. And every individual knows he has to do that for his own life. And as you set that aside, that builds capital, which allows civilization to progress. The second thing is science and technology. There are more scientists and engineers alive today than have lived in all of previous history put together. And they're inventing things, they're discovering things, and that's what really makes life better. And that ties in with the capital saved by average people, because you need capital in order to do science and engineering. The problem is this, and how the government could destroy these two mainsprings of human progress, is that when the average guy saves What does he save it? He saves in his currency, and he saves in dollars. But what happens if the